was on a dreary night of November. Welcome, Franken readers, to Sundays with Frankenstein. Cursed creator, why did you form a monster so hideous that even you turned from me in disgust? Well, wandering spirits, this is episode 9 of Sundays with Frankenstein. We'll be covering volume 2, chapters 7 and 8 of the 1818 edition today. I am Edward G. Pettit of the Rosenbach in Philadelphia. And joining me today is 19th century science fiction scholar, Dr. Anastasia Klimchinskaya. Anastasia.
Hi, Ed. It's a pleasure to be back. I hope you guys aren't getting tired of me 3 weeks in a row.
It's like you're on this show every week now. What is that? So thank you again.
I've taken over.
Good. Thank you again for jumping in last week when we had our daylight savings time snafu with our
it was a
British
pleasure.
friends. Good. All right. Yeah, and it was nice to have you, the three of you, on at the same time too. So that'll be really cool. And for everyone to know, when we do the after show at the very end on May 2nd, the very last episode, we'll be done the novel the week before, then we'll do an after show, and all of the co-hosts will be on. So it'll be the Ghoul Guy, Mary and Lauren, and Anastasia and Dan will all be on the show with me to recap the whole, series. So
yeah, we'll make sure you don't get a word in edgewise, Ed.
And that's my job for that one, definitely, is to let you guys just talk. Thanks to everyone who tuned in on Thursday night for the talk from David Gustin about Frankenstein. David's the editor of the Frankenstein Annotated for scientists, engineers, and creators of all kinds. It was a really good talk. Anastasia, you were there. How did you like that?
That was really wonderful. I wrote to David afterwards, and I just kind of said, not to be on the nose, but it was so galvanizing and just inspiring. So much great information. There's so much great insight. So I was really happy with it.
Good. You gushed about him afterwards, and I sent him just a little quote from your thing.
I did.
And he was like, "Yeah, my mom was watching," but it wasn't just his mom. It was people watching who really, who really loved his work. That didn't have to tell him he did a good job, as you did. So that's great. And are you drinking anything today? And do you have a particular mug?
I just have water, but I do find I have my, you see Sundays with Frankenstein, beautiful, with the beautiful illustration. I was going to put something very green in it because it was St. Patrick's Day a few days ago. So I had a very bright green beverage. I thought, it would look like one of those creepy little potions from Frankenstein's laboratory or something, but I decided not to.
Well, last time you were on, I think for the full show, you had your Taylor Swift mug, but we didn't mention it. But we mentioned it on the Facebook group. So
I did. And, it's actually an interesting connection because I was just at a virtual conference last week, and there was a scholar there who was giving a talk on Taylor Swift's romantic sensibility. So, essentially arguing that if you were to put an aesthetic label onto Taylor Swift's work, then romanticism with the big R is the one that most closely applies. In one of her most recent songs, she actually, she does a pun on words and references Wordsworth. So I've been thinking a lot about, early romanticism and Taylor Swift. And of course, romanticism has its connections to Frankenstein and Mary Shelley. So it's all connected and it's all thematic.
How about that's what you get here, everybody, on Sundays with Frankenstein. You even get Taylor Swift connections with Frankenstein or the era that produced Frankenstein. My super fan daughter Lulu will be very happy to hear that too. So she's watching right now.
Hi Lulu. I'm sure you're very happy about Taylor's Grammy win.
Yeah, she was. They were up late watching that. So I heard the scream from upstairs, from up here when she won. So, all righty. I have a cocktail today, and it's a red one because it contains grenadine, and it is aptly called Paradise Lost. and it features this unbelievably delicious deer slayer venison flavored whiskey from Art in the Age, from Tamworth Distilling. You can get it at Art in the Age. I absolutely love this stuff, and but it's the whiskey plus some squeezed lemon juice and grenadine to make it red. So, and this is a very red, at least the second chapter we do today is a very red chapter. We have what do we have today? We have a shooting, we have arson, we have a murder. This is chock full of exciting stuff today. So
see, I was planning to go on about, sort of Enlightenment ideals of education, but we can talk about
and he reads, yes, and that is, that's, and we get the chapter where he's reading books, and that's most of my notes. My notes are way too long today, so and I'm sure you have like plenty to say.
Well, mine are directly in the book, and I don't know if you can see, but so this is my beautiful Klinger edition, because I am a heathen who annotates even my beautiful editions. But
that's awesome. I love that. I totally love that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's annotated. It's got the green sticky notes are references to science, and then the red sticky notes are references to fate.
That's great. An annotated edition. That is perfect for what we are doing right here. Thanks to Tamworth Distilling and Art in the Age for coming up with this yummy drink today, Paradise Lost. You can buy a kit with all these ingredients at Art in the Age. Our chat Igor Brianna will put not only the recipe for this drink in our Zoom chat, we'll also put it on our website when we post this video tomorrow. And there's a link that you can go to the Art in the Age website and buy a kit to create this drink. And even on that webpage itself, there's a little box there where you can donate to the Rosenbach, which is very nice for them to add that there. But we're not just drinking here today. Well, I'm not just drinking booze. We're talking about Frankenstein. And what we do every week is dissect, anatomize, dismember, and bring back to life this book by Mary Shelley, chapter by chapter, page by page, word by word, as we create our very own conversational annotation of the entire novel. And in doing this, we at the Rosenbach ask you also to support us, which you can do by donation. And if you are not already a member, I invite you to please join the Rosenbach. The basic membership level at the Rosenbach is called the Mary Shelley level. I'll have a little more to say about this at the mid-break today. And reminder, if you're watching live on Zoom, the chat is for you to talk to each other. But if you have a question for Anastasia or myself, please put it in the Q&A, and we will do our best to hit as many of them today as possible. I thought we had a question. We don't. It was a hello from Wynwood, from Mel. Hello, Mel. Thanks for joining us today. Lots to get through, so let's just get on with the chapters, right, Anastasia? That's what we need to do.
Oh, definitely. There's so much packed into these two chapters.
Yeah, good. When we last met last week, Safie had arrived, and we got and the creature learned of her history through and he learned the DeLacy family history too. But most importantly, Safie is being taught to read French. So because that's the language of the DeLacy. So the creature is watching on and is able to learn as well just by watching someone else read. And we talked a little bit about that last week, how perhaps that's it's weird, but you can imagine that, because you can't learn how to read that way, but we can't. The creature is a superhuman, being, and he perhaps, obviously he can in this novel learn how to read that way.
Well, I think it's also just one of those things where you have to suspend your disbelief for the purposes of this novel, which if you're a fan of science fiction, I think, you're practiced at doing them, because, dilithium crystals aren't a thing, people.
And where do we get the phrase willing suspension of disbelief?
It is this a pop quiz, Ed?
Samuel Taylor Coleridge. That's a phrase from Coleridge. One of the other romantics came up with that in an essay, and I think it's in his Biographica Literaria, I think. He comes up with that. That's the way that you're supposed to let yourself go in reading works of fiction, so including poems. So
And I will not go down a rabbit hole about the rise of fictionality in this period with the rise of the novel, but it makes a lot of sense.
Maybe we will today, because we're going to be talking about Verter. So, but this chapter begins with the such was the history of my beloved cottagers. It impressed me deeply, and I learned from the views of social life which it developed to admire their virtues and to deprecate the vices of mankind. You know, in a sense, he wants to be virtuous because the de Lacys are, and this is his example. This is the whole nurture versus nature. He is learning to be virtuous because of the people he's been surrounded with and learned from.
Yeah, well, I think it's really important because the cottagers are serving for the creature as a moral example. And so much of this chapter, chapter 7, is, you know, how to educate a person to be a moral being, how to give them moral examples. So later, we'll see that happening for the creature through literature, which is how he gets his moral examples of virtue. But, you know, before he acquires those books, before he learns to read, the very first moral examples that he has are these cottagers, and they precede the kind of moral education that he gets from literature. And I think that that's really important to note.
And he's already learned some from reading Volney's, or from hearing Volney's Ruins of Empire being read. He mentioned he's learned about vice, and he's learned about history, and how, you know, men have behaved towards each other. And I say men because that's specifically what this history is about. But he's learned that in a sense, and he's also he has maintained his gentility. Now, I think this book goes back, and I think there is a sense of, you know, I said the nurture versus nature, but I think the creature keeps mentioning the fact that he is by nature genteel. He is by nature, you know, good. He seems to hint at this a couple times. But then Mary Shelley really focuses on the education he receives and how that winds up shaping him. And he finds right away, I found on the ground a leathern portmanteau containing several articles of dress and some books. Fortunately, the books were written in the language, the elements of which I had acquired at the cottage. So they're obviously translations into French. It's Paradise Lost from John Milton.
The idea of Paradise Lost being translated out of English hurts me, because it's poetry. It's a masterpiece in English.
I don't even know if there were French translations. I mean, in the 18th
conveniently, Leslie Klinger informs me that Milton's epic poem was first translated into French in 1727.
Perfect. So there was an edition available to him. That's good. I didn't have a chance to go through my other annotated because I had already had so many notes, and I was like, I can't look at the other annotated for more notes for today. So thank you for that. That's good to know. Oh, the other one was Plutarch's Lives, and the last was Sorrows of Werther. Which we will get into first, but I love how he calls them treasures. The possession of these treasures gave me extreme delight. I now continually studied and exercised my mind upon these histories. And compare that to Victor's discovery of the first authors that really shape him back in chapter 1 or chapter 2 of the book, when Victor discovers Paracelsus and Albertus Magnus, and he goes on about them, and these books were life-changing to him and shaped his intellect and his purpose. And he may even call them I'm pretty sure he calls them treasures at one point, but I can't quite remember. But it's we get this balance of the creature's life and how he develops is so like the way Victor developed as well.
Well, and not just Victor, but I seem to recall there's also a mention that, you know, contrasts Victor and Elizabeth, because Victor loves his scientific texts, whereas, you know, Elizabeth loved her poetry and her stories and her flights of imagination. Oh yeah, I have the line here. I delighted in investigating the facts relative to the actual world, she busied herself in following the aerial creations of the poets. So Elizabeth, just like the creature, is interested in fiction and in the kind of writing which is about human beings, about their moral and psychological lives, rather than about the natural world. I think that that's a significant comparison to draw.
It is with him and Elizabeth too, and that's a fault with Victor, that Victor doesn't realize that he is not concentrating on things that will teach him about people and human relationships. He is instead spending all his time just reading books that deal with, you know, science or natural philosophy. The first book that he reads is well, first he says, I found myself similar, yet at the same time strangely unlike to the beings concerning whom I read and to whose conversation I was a listener. So just another quick reminder from the creature. He cannot help constantly noticing that I can watch the DeLacy's and hear the things that they read, and I can read these books, and I'm different. Well, that'll change when he comes to Paradise Lost, but for most of these things, he notices this isn't me. So he has to apply them, and he'll do that. He gives these little book reports on each of these books, which I love. And he says, I was unformed of mind, dependent on none. Go ahead.
No, I was just, I was about to ask you if I can go down a little bit of a rabbit hole here about just kind of the role of literature. This is something that I touched on last time about the role of literature in helping you feel sympathy for people who are not yourself and who are unlike yourself. And so in the 18th century, what we have is the rise of the novel, which is a very different category than the kind of literature you had previously, because the novel is realistic fiction about, you know, regular believable people. It's not romances about larger than life characters like, say, you know, the Arthurian romances that you had before, which required kind of a new category of fictionality, a new category of relating to fiction. But one of the really interesting things about the novel, and one of the kind of ways that the rise of the novel is understood, is in terms of the way that it teaches you to feel for people who are not yourself. It teaches you empathy. And again, I touched on this last time. So it exists in this category where the novel is supposed to give you experience and training in basically identifying with people who are not yourself, whose experiences are not your experiences, and feeling them as if they are your own. And that, you know, creates sympathy, empathy, but at the same time, you shouldn't do it too much, because these characters are not real people. They're nobodies, essentially. So you practice having feelings for other people by relating to these nobodies, but you should not invest more in nobody than you do in real people. So I think this is something the creature is working out here, where, you know, as he's reading these novels, as he's reading this fiction, and also as he's looking at the DeLacy's, he's recognizing they are not like myself, that their experiences are not like my experiences, and yet I can still sympathize with them. I can identify with them across this divide, which is something arguably that he gets better at the more he reads. He trains himself in this even more, in this kind of practice of sympathy for others and this identification.
I find the difference between, you know, with novels and the rise of novels and the way that kind of prose fiction develops in the 18th and into the 19th century, as it is, the readers far more likely will empathize with characters. Previous literature, it was more of a sympathize, in just the one instance, in that it is characters in novels tended to be, for the most part, but not always, obviously, ordinary people, not people in high lofty stations, not, you know, grand heroes and heroines doing things. And that's one of the big changes of the novel, that it becomes more intimate, because it is because many novels, especially in the 18th century, are dealing with people just like us. So, and this
Yeah,
is what
yeah.
happens with the creature too, in reading, especially Werther.
Yeah, so I won't spend too much more time on this, but Katherine Gallagher is a really amazing scholar who has written on this. She's written The Rise of Fictionality and also a whole book about novel characters called Nobody's Story. And yeah, her argument is essentially that, you know, before you had either romances, which were again about larger than life people,
Yeah.
or you had what was called the like roman à clef, where it was about real people, but you used fake names and fictionalized the scenarios slightly, but you understood them to be about real people. And part of the game was guessing who is it about. And then you have the rise of this category, which is about people who have, you know, realistic sounding names, who seem just like the people around you, who live ordinary lives, but they're not real. And, you know, Gallagher's argument is that that required a completely different category of thinking and a completely different category of relating to fictional characters than you had previously. And so that was happening all throughout the 18th century, that this is how we trace the rise of the novel, at least in the Anglophone world. And in France, things are a lot more different and confused. And so the creature is kind of at the tail end of this, at the culmination of all of these trends of the rise of the novel, of a new kind of fictionality, a new kind of character, new kinds of ways of identifying with fiction. But I also think that there's just something so relatable about that, in the sense that, you know, we're all nerds here. If we're spending our Sunday with Frankenstein, like, we're nerds. We are people who have been formed by books. I mean, you know, like, I have 3 bookshelves around me of the books I grew up with right here, and books are such formative experiences for a person. They really shape who you are in so many ways. And I think that that's something that we can truly identify with, and see a little bit of ourselves in the creature, in that his life has been shaped by what we read in a fundamental way. It has helped him understand himself, and also define himself in the world in a way that it does for so many people.
Yeah. And let's get into that. The creature talking about that. He says, these books produced in me an infinity of new images and feelings that sometimes raised me to ecstasy, but more frequently sunk me into the lowest dejection. And the fact that he's not quite like these people, and he can't have the happinesses they have. But he starts with Werther, the sorrows of Werther, it's called here. Die Leiden des jungen Werthers. Forgive me for my German pronunciation, but the Die Leiden is more sufferings than sorrows, but it was first translated as, and the title was first given in English as Sorrows in the 18th century. It's by Goethe, Wolfgang von Goethe, and he published it in 1774. Kind of part of well, not kind of, it was part of the Sturm und Drang, you know, movement in literature. Well, I say in literature because Sturm und Drang doesn't really move into other art forms very much, but it's very much a literary movement by young, angry men who also want to, you know, change the world. And that Sturm und Drang it's often translated as storm and stress, but the Drang is more closely urge, desire, you know. And these are books about, you know, passion, about emotion over reason, liberty over morality. It's very much a reaction to that rational enlightenment. And it is also a specific movement that is related to the kind of broader movement of romanticism as that develops. But it's interesting with the Sturm und Drang that they are specifically understanding, these authors, Goethe and others, that they are creating some kind of new thing. And with romanticism, that's even a term that comes much later. I'm not even sure when the term romanticism is invented, and many of the people involved in a romantic movement, which also moves across, you know, different media in the arts. They're not quite aware that they're all part of a movement doing the same thing. but Goethe is very important here. And this novel, Werther, is it's a story of unrequited love. If you haven't read it, it's very short. I just actually reread it this morning, so I had it in my head. It's epistolary. It's all written in letters from young Werther, and it's about the love that he has for Lotte, this woman, Lotte. That's maybe my Philly pronunciation of latte. It sounds like you're drinking a coffee. But he loves her so much, but she has a fiance and then a husband, and he can't have her. And spoiler city, he commits suicide in the end. And we get an editor come in at the end and give us snippets of letters of his and say that and give us the end of the story. But he kills himself in this, height of his own impassioned, unrequited love. And this is a novel that was immensely popular. And there's a kind of a cult of, the cult of young Werther arises, which even was like, which is very much like even today as people or things get popular and fads arise, and like there's even a look, long hair, a yellow vest and pants and a blue jacket, and this becomes the look. And there's also what they call the Verter Effect, in which it is claimed, although I don't think there's actually any real evidence for this, that young men especially were reading this book and were so taken with it that they were committing suicide, and that it leads to this kind of rash of suicides. People believe that is going on in the late 18th century, that this book is causing that to happen, although I don't really know if there's any real evidence that it is.
Yeah, I think it's one of those myths. I think somebody in the chat said that upticks in suicide reportings actually lead to upticks in suicide. So it may have just been, that more than the novel. But I think the fact that we have this myth again comes back to these anxieties at the moment about how much fiction influences reality. Because again, if you have this new form of fiction that is more realistic than what you had previously, that depicts regular day-to-day life rather than grand things that are not real, then you're going to start thinking about how is that going to influence people's behavior. Because if you try to imitate Arthurian myths, you're going to end up like Don Quixote chasing windmills.
Mm-hmm.
But if you try to imitate the characters of a novel, a realistic novel like Madame Bovary tried to do, I mean, that's going to be a bigger problem. You're not going to be ridiculous. You're going to get yourself in trouble. And those were the concerns in the era at the moment. And I think that's what what these concerns about Werther fever, as it was called, evidence is these concerns about the influence of fiction on how people behave, which, obviously we still get that today in all of these debates about which, should we censor novels? Should we share this in the media? Do video games cause violence, etc.? You can trace that kind of lineage.
Yeah, there's there's no doubt that this novel was a sensation and really did affect people in a very real way. They had not read novels like this. This is a game changer, this novel, in the way that it is a young man writing about, it just so easily grafts even the kind of things that happened to Werther in the novel, kind of graft well into Goethe's own life, up to that point. That it's not quite autobiographical, but he is clearly putting himself into the novel and the way he feels about things. And this kind of honesty, this and forthright way of expressing emotions, regardless of the consequences, is a very it's sensational, but it's also a very real. Well, people recognize it at the time as, oh my gosh, this is, we can do this. I mean, it's revolutionary in a sense, that the way young people can express themselves in a book that happens, in cycles all throughout, Western culture, especially this young people coming out and saying, no, we need to really express ourselves and to do this. And it absolutely happens in this novel. And it's influential for everybody. It's not just there's young people into it. It is everybody loves. It's Napoleon's favorite book. Napoleon takes it with him, or he tells Goethe that. He's like, I took it with me on my campaigns to Egypt when he met Goethe. Everybody seems to be affected by this, and the creature is too. And Mary Shelley has read it not long before writing this, but she's probably read it more than once. And it was a favorite book of her parents as well. Godwin and Wollstonecraft both liked it a lot. Adam clued me into this. Go ahead.
Goethe, who wrote Verter, he also wrote a version of Faustus. So there's a version of Faustus by Christopher Marlowe, a friend of Shakespeare's, and there's a version of Faustus by Goethe. And I think that that's significant to note. It's if you look at a list of books Mary Shelley's known to have read, Goethe's Faustus is also one of them.
Yeah.
And that's significant because of the way that Frankenstein is so often read as a Faustian story. My personal interpretation is that there's some significant differences, but I think that that's another kind of vector of influence we can look at.
And he writes that over decades, his Faust play in verse, but it's not meant to be performed. It's 10 acts, it's huge, and he writes it over a long period of time. And the biggest difference of that is, and he takes the story and he does his own thing. And there's even episodes within his version that he has completely invented, that don't occur in any Faust stories that date back to, I guess, the late Middle Ages is when those stories first arise in Germany. And Marlowe has his own version of Faust, in which Faust is punished at the end. In Goethe's version, he is not. He is redeemed at the end after everything that has happened. Do you want to talk more about Faust? Because I have some things more here about Verter that I want to hit.
Yeah, let's talk about Verter. I just want to, give a quick shout out to the people in the chat. Noticed that Data and his cat Spotter on my wall. And now everybody is telling me about in the chat which cats are watching the show with them. And so I just want to say, I love all of your cats. I'm so happy they're watching me. I'm not going to meow at them, but I love all of your cats. And thank you for bringing them to join the party.
That's one of the things that we get in this world, this Zoom world. We get all these pets can be in everyone's shows, as the pets of Zoom, I call them. We normally never would have seen or met. So the Verter is, and Adam clued me into this, and I did check up on the biographies, and on the night before Mary Wollstonecraft goes into labor, Godwin and Mary Wollstonecraft are reading Sorrows of Werther to each other, which I find utterly fascinating. But it goes even deeper than that, because Godwin, in his memoirs of Wollstonecraft, memoirs of the author of The Vindication of the Rights of Woman, which he published after she had died, and which destroyed her reputation because he was so honest about her life and her loves and the things that she had done in her life that everybody immediately turned on her, and she was a pariah, a literary pariah for a century after she died. Godwin writes in that about persons. There are persons by no means hard and insensible, who from an elastic and sanguine turn of mind are continually prompted to look on the fair side of things, and having suffered one fall, immediately rise again to pursue their course with the same eagerness, the same hope, and the same gaiety as before. And then he says, on the other hand, we not unfrequently meet with persons endowed with the most exquisite and delicious sensibility, whose minds seemed almost of too fine a texture to encounter the vicissitudes of human affairs, to whom pleasure is transport and disappointment is agony indescribable. This character is finely portrayed by the author of the Sorrows of Werther. And then he writes, Mary, meaning Mary Wollstonecraft, was in this respect a female Verter. So this is how Godwin sees, his wife, Mary Wollstonecraft, that of having almost too fine a texture to encounter the vicissitudes of human affairs. Her emotional life is so extreme that she can't control it. And then, but she actually attempts suicide a couple times in her early life. But it's also him also kind of making her into the tragic figure of his own life. And she has a tragic end, dying in childbirth.
Yeah, although, the thing with Werther is, despite all of these myths about people imitating, you're not supposed to imitate him. Like, he's not supposed to be someone you imitate. It's almost like a cautionary tale in that he feels too much. He does not know how to deal with those feelings. And ultimately he kills himself, which I suppose is preferable to killing Lottie, which, in other romantic versions, I could see that being what happens. But so you mentioned that Werther is a Bildungsroman, which is a novel of education. When, the way a Bildungsroman is often understood is that it's a story about a person kind of becoming socialized and learning how to take their place in society as like a rational citizen and human being. And I think I've said this during a previous show. Werther's story is he fails to do that. He cannot do that. He fails to such an extent to deal with his own emotions and his own interiority that he cannot relate to other human beings in a normal, sensible, contained way. So he has to kill himself. He has to remove himself from the world because he cannot find a way to exist within the social sphere as a human being. And in that sense, it's like an anti-Bildungsroman. So again, as we're talking about the creature and the creature's education and how the creature himself is learning how to be a person in the world, it's significant that the first text he reads is Werther, which is about a being who fails to take his place in the world, who fails to become a multifaceted, well-developed, mature person, which we don't have to get into this too much now. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but when we see the creature just inundated with emotion after he's rejected by the de Lacys, I think we can see some parallels with Werther in the way that he cannot control his feelings.
These whole 2 chapters we're going to cover today. This is, what the creature does. He's full of rage and then despair, and then he's feeling okay again and a little hopeful, and then back to the rage, and he can't control his emotions at all. What he says about Werther, he says, his report on it is the gentle and domestic manners it described, combined with lofty sentiments and feelings, which had for their object something out of self, accorded well with my experience among my protectors. Werther himself is a more divine being, has a character. His character contained no pretensions, but it sunk deep. And he says, I inclined towards the opinions of the hero, whose extinction I wept without precisely understanding it. That he is really taken with the way Werther, behaves, the way he feels things, and that the character that has no pretension but sunk deep. So the creature really feels he's read a book about this person who, he's really read about who he is inside, that it's something very deep that he has learned about this person. And it leads the creature to reflect upon himself, just as Werther's, expressing everything about himself, the creature then does. And he says, I found myself similar, yet at the same time, strangely unlike to the beings concerning whom I read that part. I was unformed in mind. And then he says, dependent on none and related to none. And then he has, if you don't notice it, he says, the path of my departure was free, which is actually a quote from a Percy Shelley poem, Mutability, which Victor had quoted from just a couple chapters ago, just before he meets the creature in that poem of Shelley's on mutability, which there's a stanza in the novel, and in that it's all about how we rest, a dream has power to poison sleep. We rise, one wandering thought pollutes the day. We feel, conceive, or reason, laugh or weep, embrace fond woe, or cast our cares away. It is the same, for be it joy or sorrow, the path of its departure still is free. Man's yesterday may ne'er be like his morrow, naught may endure but mutability. That no matter what we do, no matter how we feel about something, it's going to change. Our emotions will change over, even just over the course of a day. And the creature finds that too. For Victor, it is a sense of he can find no solace. And what is the point of even trying to find the solace when then in just a little bit, I won't feel that way anymore. And that's kind of a problem. Victor sees it as a problem. His own, right before the poem, he says, if our impulses were confined to hunger, thirst, and desire, we might be nearly free. But now we are moved by every wind that blows and a chance word or scene that word may convey to us. So Victor's upset by this, that his freedom means that he can never have any peace.
Well, and I think Victor is also upset by the lack of control, because to use some modern terminology, as the kids these days say, Victor seems to be a little bit of a control freak. He wants mastery over everything, nature included, and also his emotions. And so he cannot stomach the fact that his emotions are something he cannot control, but possibly there's something he cannot control because he has never learned to deal with them, because he's been off studying science without kind of any humanistic study to complement it. And so that's why his emotions overwhelm him, because he has never learned to address them in any way, which I think is very different from the creature, who is so interested in understanding what he feels, who also realizes that, external triggers in the world can change how he feels, and produce certain sensations. But for him, that is a catalyst for interrogating his own interiority, for trying to understand himself better, rather than, to weep his own helplessness and lack of control over he feels.
Yeah.
Over what he feels.
Yeah. And this, and just as, and the creature in saying the path of my departure was free, for him, for Victor, it's because things will change and I'll think something else and none of this will matter. For the creature, it is the fact that there's none to lament my annihilation, he says. He says, my person was hideous, my stature gigantic. What did this mean? Who was I? What was I? Whence did I come? What was my destination? These questions continually recur, but I was unable to solve them. His freedom is hindered by the fact that he is, first of all, so hideous that he can't relate to other people, but also he doesn't know who he's from or where he's come from. So the freedom doesn't help him at all. Does that make sense? That seems to be what I'm gathering out of here. But also this idea that reading about Werther and this deep character, leading him to think about his own self, that's also what art does for us. And that's especially an approach in romanticism, that, you develop the interior mind, as that's Wordsworth's prelude, or the growth of a poet's mind. And that by pouring yourself into your work, into your art, then you are revealing yourself, but it also allows for people to read it and then discover things about themselves through you revealing yourself. And this is this is what happens with the creature reading Werther.
Yeah, well, and romanticism was, again, in many ways a response to classicism, which was, or neoclassicism, which was the preceding movement, which again took inspiration from classical antiquity, and so much of which was, about these questions of duty and honor and heroism and politics and the state. And as you said, romanticism is so much about interiority. It's about personal experiences. It's about personal sensations. It's about bringing other people into what you are feeling, into kind of these moments in time. That's what you have, for example, in lyrical ballads. And as you say, that's kind of what is happening here, that, you know, kind of these meditations upon interiority and feeling, and kind of that's what literature does for us. It's what literature is doing here.
Well, your perfect segue talking about neoclassicism, because then the next book that the creature reads is a volume of Plutarch's Lives, about the first founders of the ancient republics. And he says it had a far different effect. Plutarch taught me high thoughts. He elevated me above the wretched sphere of my own reflections to admire and love the heroes of past ages. This is precisely what you're saying neoclassicism does, by reading those classical authors. Public affairs, then he also governing or massacring their species, ardor for virtue, and he feels ardor for virtue rise within me, the creature says, and abhorrence for vice. So he admires peaceable lawgivers, and that he's taking from this because, you know, this kind of literature seems to be, at least the way it's presented in the neoclassical age, is very, it's the idea is to teach you how to be a better person by looking at the lives of these great lofty heroes from the past.
Yeah, so the it's called Plutarch's Lives. They're parallel lives. So you have a life of a Greek person and then a Roman. And yeah, they were meant to be exemplars of virtue, and in particular, exemplars of virtue for rulers, for statesmen, of, you know, how to be a just ruler, how to be a wise ruler, how to lead a good existence. And you know, they were incredibly influential even after antiquity. They remained kind of exemplars people read, and even as late as—
it's what you learn in school. I mean, it's the classical education in school where you read these things, and Shakespeare takes them and uses the lives to write plays from them as well.
Yeah, and if you read, for example, 19th century kind of adventure historical novels, for example, characters in novels by Alexandre Dumas of Three Musketeers fame, they will sort of model themselves on ancient heroes, and some of them will explicitly kind of read Plutarch's Lives and be, you know, I want to be a hero and a virtuous person like these people I read about in Plutarch.
The creature's getting this little classical education that, you know, he would have gotten if he was a regular person educated of his class. But he also notes too that the patriarchal lives of my protectors, meaning the de Lacys, caused these impressions to take a firm hold on my mind. If my first introduction to humanity had been made by a young soldier burning for glory and slaughter, I should have been imbued with different sensations. So he acknowledges the fact that because of the way I've been nurtured by this family and observing them and the way they adhere to this kind of virtuous, you know, classical ideals, it would have been different had I been observing, you know, a soldier who just wants to go out and have glory and kill people. That he would have taken, I think what he's saying is I would have taken different lessons from Plutarch's Lives if that had been, you know, the kind of culture that I was in at the time, or the society. But he's with a de Lacy, so he's okay. Now we get to the big one, right? Paradise Lost. There we go. But Paradise Lost excited different and far deeper emotions. And he says that I read it as a true history, which I love. The fact that that's how he reads it. Paradise Lost, everyone published.
That's so weird, because I mean, if you are a Christian, then Paradise Lost is true. All of the characters in it, with the exception of the narrator, technically, are real. Like it is a true story. So yeah, I find that line like
I think
hilarious.
It's Lauren, Dr. Laura Nixon describes it as I think it was her that said it's Bible fan fiction. That Milton, and we all tell these stories, and the war with Satan and heaven and all that kind of stuff, and it's all from Milton. It's not actually from the Bible. Now, obviously, the Adam and Eve story is, and that's partly what it's about. Milton publishes this in 1667. He wants to write a great epic modeled on, like the kind of thing that Virgil, would have written, or that Virgil wrote when he wrote the Aeneid. And Milton's looking for a story. He actually thinks that perhaps I could do an Arthurian epic, and then realizes that it's just not virtuous enough, and it's not. Maybe that's why I love Arthurian legend so much. So he settles on this, and this is a daring thing for him to write and do. I mean, they've just gone through the Civil War. Milton's gone from one side to the other. He's all in favor of the Civil War, and then after it all falls apart and they go back to a monarchy, he's one of the few that is able to at least keep his station in life, that he's not punished for his adherence to the revolution.
I mean, Paradise Lost is about, or it starts with Satan's rebellion against God, and there has been very much ink spilled about the parallels between that and the English Civil War and the rebellion against and beheading of King Charles I in 1649, and
he writes in the beginning, it's about his purpose is to justify the ways of God to men, meaning that the fall of Adam and Eve in this poem is ultimately providential, because they are given free will and then can thus have redemption, at the end of their lives. This is why we suffer and are no longer in paradise, because we will be redeemed in the end, if we choose, because we have free will. And Satan doesn't have it in the poem. Satan doesn't have free will. He can only act the way he acts and never can seem to choose any other way.
So you say justify the ways of God to men, and like the only thing I can see in my head is that scene from Star Wars. It's a trap. The whole point of Paradise Lost is that it's a trap for the reader. It's a trap because it says, I'm going to justify the ways of God to men. But you can't do that because he's God and you're human. You do not, ontologically, you are just different categories of beings. And a human being does not have the capacity to understand the ways of God. So from the very first line, you can kind of see this almost performance happening where the novel says, I'm going to justify the ways of God to men. And then it starts with Satan, and the first two books are about Satan, and it makes Satan really compelling. And the way the Romantics read this is that, Milton just really liked Satan, or, Blake said Milton was of Satan's party and didn't realize it.
Yeah. The reason Milton wrote in fetters when he wrote of angels and God, and at liberty when of devils and hell, is because he was a true poet and of the devil's party without knowing it. That's the Blake quote from The Marriage of Heaven and Hell.
So Blake has fallen into the trap that Milton set for the reader, because the trap is that you're supposed to fall for Satan. You're supposed to be compelled by Satan. And then you're supposed to realize, I only fell for Satan because I'm human and flawed, and I find his reasoning compelling, but I shouldn't have done that. And you're supposed to go on that trajectory as a reader. But again, that is absolutely not how the Romantics read that text. They saw Satan as this kind of romantic anti-hero that they latched onto.
He is rebelling against a tyrannical God in the poem. And Percy Shelley recognizes, when he's writing his Prometheus Unbound play, in the preface to that, he writes about how Prometheus is a more poetical character than Satan, he says. Because in addition to courage and majesty and firm and patient opposition to omnipotent force, he is susceptible of being described as exempt from the taints of ambition, envy, revenge, and a desire for personal aggrandizement, which in the hero of Paradise Lost interfere with the interest. He says the character of Satan engenders in the mind a pernicious casuistry, which leads us to weigh his faults with his wrongs and excuse the former, his faults, because the latter his wrongs exceed all measure. That he recognizes this is that, and I'm sure Mary did as well, that like, don't be tricked. Satan's all about envy and revenge and ambition. It's Prometheus who's the real, classical hero you should admire, but they still all love. I mean, and it's hard not to enjoy. They're the best parts of Paradise Lost still.
You're falling into the trap,
Yeah.
Ed. Like,
Yeah.
like the way the Empire set the trap in Star Wars, and the rebellion flies into it. Like, you're falling into the trap.
Right. You want to be Adam in Paradise Lost? That's no fun. The creature looks at it and he says, well, by reading it as a true history, he says he sees the wonder and awe in it, an omnipotent God warring with his creatures. And then he says, then the creature, he says, like Adam, I was apparently united by no link to any other being in existence. Do you have that paragraph there?
Yeah.
Read that from like Adam to the end of that paragraph.
Yeah, like Adam, I was created apparently united by no link to any other being in existence, but his state was far different from mine in every other respect. He had come forth from the hands of God, a perfect creature, happy and prosperous, guarded by the especial care of his creator. He was allowed to converse with and acquire knowledge from beings of a superior nature, but I was wretched, helpless, and alone. Many times I considered Satan as the fitter emblem of my condition, for often, like him, when I viewed the bliss of my protectors, the bitter gall of envy rose within me.
I mean, he sees himself in both of those. There's, and yet at the end, he's like, there's even more of him with Satan than there is with Adam, but he is both.
Well, but it's interesting because he sees himself as Satan because he is desolate and alone and cast out. But the thing is, Satan is cast out because he rebelled, because he rebelled
did
against
something.
God.
He acted and did something.
The
creature did not.
The creature at this point in the novel, has not committed any faults, and yet he is nonetheless cast out. And I think we're supposed to understand that contrast and the injustice of that contrast, that the creature is punished like Satan, but he is pure like Adam before the fall, before Adam and Eve committed the sin of eating the apple.
But even they depart Eden in hope, with the world before them. They at least have that at the end, but Satan does not, obviously. He's trapped in hell forever. He also discovers in the pockets of the dress, which I had taken from the laboratory, Victor's journal, your journal of the 4 months that preceded my creation. You minutely described in these papers every step you took in the progress of your work. So what we get is he's reading Victor's journal about, and it's everything that he's doing scientifically and how he's putting the creature together and creating him. But I imagine it's also his observations as we were reading in like chapter 3, as he's creating the creature. And in a sense, it's like the creature's reading his own Paradise Lost story. This is the version of Paradise Lost that features the creature instead of Adam and Lucifer. That it's it's the Frankenstein scripture is what it is. And that's obviously how he's seeing it after reading Paradise Lost, that it's that level of literature for him. It's scriptural.
That's such a great connection. I love that, but also just it's so convenient that he just finds these notes.
Yeah. Oh, what's this? The journal.
I mean, I think Frankenstein is a masterpiece, but I think there are so many moments where you're just kind of like, well, this is so convenient.
Yes, there's a lot of convenience in this.
Which,
the fact that these works that he's also found are translated into French too. So I happen to find French translations these books. So
yeah, and I mean, books have been written on chance and convenience and coincidence in fiction, and especially in the 19th century novels. So there is a whole literature on that.
I do like how complete this conception of the creature is, though, for Mary Shelley, in that when he first encounters Victor, he's already speaking. Just the diction that he uses is like a character out of Paradise Lost, and that she already has this conception of him that appears before she actually brings that work into the story. That she knows that he will speak that way because this is the works that he read that enable him to speak. And just as, Werther is the book that teaches him how I'm supposed to be so passionate and how I feel and react in life. And the Plutarch's Lives being his understanding of the whole virtue and vice and what you're supposed to, these high ideals and how you're supposed to behave in life. And he always knows this. He always knows later in the novel when he's doing evil that he is absolutely doing evil, because he understands the difference from reading these, classical stories of how these ancient rulers behaved. So all of these books shape him. And we've already gotten a taste of that and how he was speaking to Victor when they first met. But the final note here is in reading this, the whole detail of that. After reading the journal now, the whole detail of that series of disgusting circumstances which produced it is set in view. The minutest description of my odious and loathsome person is given in language which painted your own horrors and rendered mine indelible. I sickened as I read, hateful day when I received life. I exclaimed in agony, cursed creator, why did you form a monster so hideous that even you turned from me in disgust? God in pity made man beautiful and alluring after his own image, but my form is a filthy type of yours, more horrid from its very resemblance. Satan had his companions, fellow devils, to admire and encourage him, but I am solitary and detested. And that cursed creator, why did you form a monster so hideous? That harkens back to the epigraph that has begun this novel, that is in, the beginning of all 3 volumes, the first edition. Did I request thee, maker, from my clay to mold me man? Did I solicit thee from darkness to promote me? And this is...
Oh, you beat me to reciting that, Ed.
It's in my notes. That's why. The creature is bringing it all back home to the reader who has begun this book on that title page, and that is the point of that epigraph. That the creature is Adam in this sense, as Adam is questioning his maker, why he made him. The creature is not only questioning, but because of the nature of Victor's journal and how he has described him as from his filthy workshop of creation, the creature is cursing him, and it is far more like Satan than Adam in that moment of cursing him.
Mm-hmm. Although that it is a quote from Adam in Paradise Lost. It is Adam asking God, why did you create me? But also, can we pause for a moment to talk about the fact that Victor apparently wrote down every step of his research, which do you know that it's this phrase for, what is it, Mythbusters, the difference between screwing around and science is writing it down. Victor wrote it down, so he's doing science. But also, when he's talking to Walt and he's like, I can't tell you the secret of life, like, because then you might also make life, and that would be bad, as I've learned. But apparently he just wrote it all down, and it's just out here in the world for anybody who wants to read it. But no, Walton, I can't tell you this secret.
Well, doesn't he? Is it destroyed at the end? Does he have the journal? Does the creature take it? I can't remember. We'll have to hit there.
I can't remember here. We'll have to check. But just for the moment, it tickled me a little bit that he wrote down every little bit of this. And somebody, this would make for an interesting, Frankenstein pastiche or
It's been done in adaptations where the creature still has the journal and then returns and asks someone else to make him a mate in like adaptations after this novel that other people have written. So let me take a mid-break then before we get into the creature's first birthday.
Okay, while you do that break, I'm just going to step away for just 1 second. I'll be right back while you do the announcements.
We bring you Sundays with Frankenstein, everyone, for free, as we did Sundays with Dracula last year. So if you'd like to donate to the Rosenbach, you can do so at our website. But why not become a member? Members of the Rosenbach get free and exclusive access to some programs, plus 10% off of any of our reading courses, of which there's an awful lot coming, including an Oscar Wilde course that starts on Tuesday night. 50% off of any Rosenbach programs. And the basic membership level is called the Mary Shelley level. So what could be more perfect for you Franken readers to join the Rosenbach at the Mary Shelley level and help us bring the books and manuscripts in our collections to life. And I want to give a shout out to some new members, people who joined the Rosenbach just over the last week. And at the Mary Shelley level, Noria from Marion Station, PA joined, Brian from Philadelphia, and Raymond from Havertown, PA. Ray, I know Ray. If you're watching, Ray, thanks for joining. They all joined at the Mary Shelley level. And at the Abigail Adams level, Alexandra from Philadelphia joined, and Pi, P.I. is her name, and I know her too. She takes some of our courses. Pi joined from Oro Valley, Arizona. So if you guys are watching, thanks so much for your support. And to everyone who has joined the Rosenbach over the course of Sundays with Dracula and over the course of this new show, or has just given a donation, your support helps me make this show and helps the Rosenbach continue to create programs and care for our collections. So thank you all very much. And I want to tell you very quickly about a couple free programs that are coming up very soon. And I will share my screen with that. First is this one. As you can see, Mary Shelley, the Godmother of Goth, virtual Behind the Bookcase tour. This is this Thursday night, March 25th at 6 p.m. EST. And in this, I will be showing items from our collections, including letters and first editions of Mary Shelley's, and just kind of going through her whole career. This is a free program, so you can register for it and not pay anything. And let me show you something else from this. Where is that? Oh, I want to share something from what I'm going to show that night, just as a teaser. There it is. Can you see that? Beautiful. This I will reveal on Thursday night, and I'm not going to tell you what it is right now. So it's just a teaser. Look at that gorgeous letter, and the red seal is still on it, and it's addressed, and there's a postscript written on the back of it here after it was folded up. So if you come Thursday night, you will find out what this letter is and how it relates to Mary Shelley's life. Also, on the April 1st, there will be a virtual presentation on Shakespeare. And let me see if I can share that one with you. I'm very excited about that one. This is the Mary Shelley, and here's the Shakespeare. A friend, a foe, and a fair youth, finding Shakespeare in early printings and later manuscripts. I will be presenting this with my colleague Andrew White from the Rosenbach. So if you want to see me talk about something other than monsters, well, here it is. You can come on April 1st. This is a free program, and watch us share items from our collection about Shakespeare. We have a vast Shakespeare collection, including a quarto from 1609 from Shakespeare's lifetime, A Merchant of Venice, that I'll be sharing and talking about myself. So lots of fun things coming up at the Rosenbach, and I invite you all to join me and support the Rosenbach. Thank you very much. Back to the novel.
I was just going to say, I read an article yesterday that they figured out what Shakespeare looked like because they figured out that the bust on his grave was actually not created posthumously.
Yes. I have to read that. It's a Guardian article and I haven't read it yet, but yeah, so I've got to read that. I've seen somebody shared that with me yesterday after we did our Shakespeare read aloud. So
Yeah, they quoted a scholar who says that, you know, Shakespeare looks like a pork butcher, which I
a
find
pork butcher.
hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, I like that. That's fine by me. So the back to the chapter here. When I contemplated the virtues of the cottagers, their amiable and benevolent dispositions, I persuaded myself that when they should become acquainted with my admiration of their virtues, they would compassionate me. They would compassionate me and overlook my personal deformity. Could they turn from their door one, however monstrous, who solicited their compassion and friendship? And then he is going to fit myself for an interview, that he is going to, decide to present himself to them. He decides that it's going to be to the father because he's blind, and he recognizes right away that he will, not be as prejudiced against him because he won't be able to see how hideous he looks. And he's really happy in this moment. I cherished hope. It is true, he says, but then it would vanish when he sees his reflection in the water. He says, sometimes I allowed my thoughts, unchecked by reason, to ramble in the fields of paradise and dared to fancy amiable and loving creatures sympathizing with my feelings and cheering my gloom. Their angelic countenances breathed smiles of consolation, but it was all a dream. No Eve soothed my sorrows or shared my thoughts. I was alone. I remembered Adam's supplication to his creator, that's the epigraph. But where was mine? He had abandoned me, and in the bitterness of my heart, I cursed him. So he's behaving Werther-like, he is, one moment hopeful and happy, and the next moment in complete despondency. And then he sees the leaves decay and fall, and winter comes. He's revolving his projects on which he's finally going to reveal himself. And but just before that, just to know for everybody, it's been a year. He has been in this hovel for a year watching the DeLacy. So it's happy birthday, but I guess what name do we put on the cake for the creature? Because he's not given one yet. Or when you sing happy birthday, you get to happy birthday, dear. So we don't have a name for him. But it is his birthday, and this is how he's finally going to, become happy by meeting the DeLacys. And oh boy, yeah, it's still in this. I thought that was the beginning of the next chapter, but it's here.
This is a shockingly long chapter. The others are very short, much shorter by comparison.
Yeah, but he knocks and he waits till the old man's alone, till Felix and Agatha and Safie are out. And the old man invites him in, and he says, the creature says, "Pardon this intrusion," which is a trivia question, right? First words the creature says to anybody in the novel is, "Pardon this intrusion." So polite. And this is who he is. This is how he's been taught by this family to be polite. But also the language that he uses, he has also gotten from what he reads. So it's going to be elevated. And he says, "I am a traveler in want of a little rest." Everything he says is so pregnant with meaning too. "I am a traveler in want of a little rest. You would greatly oblige me if you would allow me to remain a few minutes before the fire." Fire. I mean, there's this, the Promethean fire, the creation, it gives us warmth, it provides us with comfort. He is, this is what he asks DeLacy when he first comes in. DeLacy thinks, he says, "Oh, you sound like a stranger. Are you French?" And he says, "No, but I was educated by a French family," being obviously the DeLacys, "and I'm going to claim some protection of my friends whom I sincerely love and of whose favor I have some hopes." He says, I am an unfortunate and deserted creature. I look around and I have no relation or friend upon earth. These amiable people to whom I go, I have never seen, who to whom I go have never seen me and know little of me. I am full of fears. I am an outcast in the world. And of course, the DeLacy father says, rely on your hopes. If these friends are good and amiable, do not despair. And the creature's like, no, 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 no. I'm a detestable monster. They're not going to accept me. And then, but DeLacy is, accepting of him. And he said, and then the creature says, excellent man, I thank you and accept your generous offer. You raise me from the dust by this kindness. The idea that the creature is created again, that metaphor to raise, him from the dust, that just as God, Yahweh in the Bible and Paradise Lost creates Adam out of the earth. And Adam itself means earth, dust, clay, in Hebrew. But this is what he says that DeLacy is doing for him just by accepting him. He's giving him life.
Mm-hmm.
And then the tragic part, he hears the kids coming home. I had not a moment to lose, but seizing the hand of the old man, I cried, now is the time. Save and protect me. You and your family are the friends whom I seek. Do not you desert me in the hour of trial. Great God, exclaimed the old man. Who are you? You want to finish that chapter?
Mm-hmm. At that instant, the cottage door was opened, and Felix, Safie, and Agatha entered. Who can describe their horror and consternation on beholding me? Agatha fainted, and Safie, unable to attend to her friend, rushed out of the cottage. Felix started forward, and with supernatural force tore me from his father. To his knees I clung. In a transport of fury, he dashed me to the ground and struck me violently with a stick. I could have torn him limb from limb, as the lion rends the antelope, but my heart sunk within me as with bitter sickness, and I refrained. I saw him on the point of repeating his blow when, overcome by pain and anguish, I quitted the cottage, and in the general tumult escaped unperceived to my hovel.
Oh, that is crushing. That is...
It breaks my heart, yeah.
After all, and this moment where, I can just imagine first readers of this novel, and maybe this happened to some of you first reading it for the first time out there, that, because of the way the blind father reacts, you think, wow, this will be interesting, that he's going to be with the DeLacy family and they'll have some kind of happy, now, obviously it'll end badly in the future, but they'll be, and not even that.
He's cast out once again.
And violently, like Felix come in and hits him with a stick. It is heartbreaking after, and it's, the creature kind of expects it in a sense before he goes in, that he knows that this is going to be really difficult, and he's up and down in his hopes and despair, and then it just seems like it's going to work out, and boom, he's hit. The blind man too. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I just want to say it's so jarring because, we have just spent a chapter with the creature in his head, and we've become familiar with, we've begun to sympathize with him and relate to him and understand him as a person, as a human creature who feels and exists just like ourselves. We can see our own interiority in him.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what makes that final moment of him being cast out so jarring, because it is such a sharp contrast to, we as readers have come to understand his humanity through his language, through his words, his meditations on himself. And so we very firmly believe in his humanity, in his personhood. And then to experience him being cast out like that, it is supposed to be painful and jarring. And it is precisely because of that contrast and the injustice and the way we as readers are going, well, if only you knew what we knew, if only you had access to his words and his thoughts the way that we do, you would not have cast him out like this.
Yeah. And you wonder why people reacted so much to reading Stars of Verter. I mean, you spend all this time learning this character, learning who this person revealing their innermost, hopes and despairs. And then, this happens. And this is the power of reading, right? That we get and Mary Shelley has crafted a great scene. I was going to mention too, how almost, how Frankenstein adaptations, and so many of them do the blind old man in it, because it is a part that you just like, so much else has changed, but that blind old man scene is very frequently in adaptations, and always is moving, even in the funny, Young Frankenstein, which is brilliantly hilarious with Gene Hackman playing, but it's still moving, the way they're together and the way he's kind of, found a friend in that scene. So I love the Bride of Frankenstein, especially because it's drink good and smoke good. He's like smoking a cigar with them. Obviously, the creature and I would be smoking and drinking here if he was on the show, so I would be good with that. But he is cast out, and then chapter 8, he's cursing Victor. But it's interesting because it's also a reminder that he's actually telling this story to Victor. So this isn't a, like, this is what I was thinking then. This is, I think, him saying to Victor out loud, cursed creator, why did I live? Why in that instant did I not extinguish the spark of existence which you had so wantonly bestowed? He's saying this to Victor at their little fire in the cave, or the hut, a little hovel, a little hut that he's made in the mountains. I know not, despair had not yet taken possession of me. My feelings were those of rage and revenge first. The anger of this is what hits him first. I could with pleasure have destroyed the cottage and its inhabitants, and have glutted myself with their shrieks and misery. I mean, that's a really extreme reaction. I'm so angry. I could have destroyed you people. I could have crushed you. And, with pleasure, he calls it, that that's the level of anger that's inside him.
Well, it's an impulse to revenge, and that's also Satan's first impulse when he rebels against God and he is cast out of heaven and into hell. And instead of, accepting that this is a just punishment for what he tried to do because he rebelled against God, he says, no, this is unfair, and actually we're gonna seek revenge on God for casting us down by destroying his precious creation, which is man, by going into the garden and tempting them with the tree of knowledge, and therefore making them fall and corrupting God's precious creation. So since we've been talking so much about the ways in which literature influences people to feel and to act, I think we have to ask, he's been reading Paradise Lost, and he's been identifying so powerfully, not just with Adam, but particularly with Satan, who is cast out and wretched. And I think there's a question to be asked about whether that is something that he learned or that he took from Paradise Lost, that the appropriate response to being cast out and rejected is to seek revenge, to be filled with anger and rage and fury and desire to act on it.
Yeah. I think it is. I think this is a learned thing, and it's learned from that work. And he drives the point home in this next paragraph here. First, he's wandering around the wood and gives vent to anguish and fearful howlings like a wild beast. And then he says, all save I were at rest or in enjoyment. I, like the arch fiend, bore a hell within me. So he's immediately going to, this is how I feel. I feel like this. I feel like Satan in Paradise Lost. And so that to me says that yes, and this whole reaction, his whole revenge, the ideas that he's expressing now come from his experience of reading that work. And who else said bore a hell within me in this novel? Of course.
Satan.
Oh,
Oh,
and
you're
yeah.
not. Oh, sorry, you're not talking about
And
Paradise Lost.
Victor
Victor.
just said it a couple chapters ago. Victor says he bore a hell within me. When he's in the cell with Justine, he's thinking this. Oh, I bore a hell within me, and like my reaction at the time, and it was like, really, Victor? Like she's the one condemned here, and you're just thinking about the hell you're bearing, that's within you. But it's
Well, especially because in the kind of theology of Paradise Lost, the hell that Satan has been cast into is, I mean, he has been physically cast into hell, but the important thing is that the true hell he is in is to be outside the presence of God.
Yeah.
Satan just does not recognize this as a hell, and that's why he says, we'll make the mind is its own place, and you can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven, and therefore we're going to like build heaven in hell, because he does not recognize that hell is a state of not a physical place, but a state of being. And this is also something that this line is playing on. This isn't about the creature being in any way physically casted. This is about kind of his moral and emotional state of desolation and of remove, although in this case from other human beings rather than from God.
Yeah, in Paradise Lost, it's horror and doubt distract his troubled thoughts, and from the bottom stir the hell within him. For within him hell he brings, and round about him, nor from hell one step no more than from himself can fly by change of place. Because the hell is within him, he can never escape it. And the creature and Victor both liken themselves to Satan in that they bear that hell. Except when the creature wants to enjoy the ruin, he says, finding myself unsympathized with, wish to tear up the trees, spread havoc and destruction around me, and then to have sat down and enjoyed the ruin. The creature is, translating this feeling of hell within him, that I want to go out and destroy things. And this is, he declares his, war on mankind in a sense right here. He says, from that moment, I declared everlasting war against the species, and more than all, against him who had formed me and sent me forth to this insupportable misery. But then the pleasant sunshine and the pure air of day restored me to some degree of tranquility. And he starts feeling like, all right, maybe, as the morning comes along, maybe I can do something. He says, I resolved to return to the cottage, seek the old man, and by representations, win him to my party, which I think is an interesting phrase there. Especially as we already mentioned that, Milton was of Satan's party and didn't know it, kind of thing. But he heads back, and that back and forth, I just, we'll move on, because he reconsiders and decides to return to the cottage. And then I'll hit that later. There's a question here, but talking about the film and comparing it to what happens here, but that's for later with William. And he overhears, it's empty, and then Felix comes along with someone, and Felix tells him, we can never again inhabit our cottage, your cottage. The life of my father is in the greatest danger, owing to the dreadful circumstance that I have related. My wife and my sister will never recover their horror. I entreat you not to reason with me anymore. Take possession of your tenement. Let me fly from this place. And the creature says, I never saw any of the family of De Lacy more. Another sad note. Like, it's been redoubled, because he's in a rage and declaring war, an everlasting war on humans, and then he's like, all right, I should go back and try again, and it's just another kick. he's been hit again by Felix. My protectors had departed and had broken the only link that had held me to the world. For the first time, the feelings of, and then he says, for the first time, the feelings of revenge and hatred filled my bosom. Well, it's not the first time. Did you forget last night? But he says, and I did not strive to control them, which I think is what he's really saying is the first time, that this is the first time these feelings, I've had this hatred and revenge, and I'm not even going to try to control it as he did the night before.
Well, and I think there's something to be said for the fact that, the besides Paradise Lost, he also read Plutarch, which is supposed to teach you to emulate virtue. And yet, he's not emulating virtue. He is considering revenge the way that Satan does. So it's one text rather than the other influencing him. And I think we might read this as, Mary Shelley interrogating, because we know Mary Shelley was and her father William Godwin were interested in education and in questions of education that were so significant in the Enlightenment. I think there's something to be said for the way that he takes from one text and not the other, and so therefore for the way that no amount of education and no amount of reading about virtuous people is going to help you, be a moral being within society if you are completely cast out and poor and desolate and wretched and is just, you need more than moral examples to make a good human being.
Yeah. These thoughts vanished, he says, and a gush of tears somewhat soothed me. But again, when I reflected that they had spurned and deserted me, anger returned, a rage of anger. He is not like these classical, heroes and can control himself. But he's also made that choice and as, and specifically said, I did not strive to control. That he is choosing to be this. He is not a creature of determined impulses. He is, able to decide what he does. And this is the choice that he's making now.
He has free will like Adam did. And no, I think there's something to be said for this.
He is not Satan. He has free will. Angels don't have free will. And Satan's, I think Milton alludes to this in that poem without saying it, that they, or maybe he does, and I just don't know, that the angels that rebel do so because they just do. Like, this is part of the grand plan, the providential plan, that they will do so. They don't have a choice in that. But Adam and Eve certainly do. So.
Yeah, and there's a distinction between feeling things and acting upon them. And as you point out, at first the creature does try to control his feelings of fury, maybe in being inspired by Plutarch and virtue, but then in the end he decides, no, I'm not. I'm gonna, like Satan, give in to this desire for revenge.
Or like in SARS of Verter, people are constantly telling him, giving him advice to behave in a different way, to do different things. And he constantly says, no, I can't do that. He can, but he chooses not to. And that is his tragedy, that he refuses to, that he behaves the way he did, that he acts in the way that he does. And I think it's in a sense it's like the end of Verter is in a sense the kind of, when he kills himself, it is tragic because he did not have to, unlike something like a tragedy like Romeo and Juliet, where you feel like they could have gone, like it's accidental, like she didn't mean to kill herself and he did, but then she did, and like it could have been resolved. They could have actually been happy, and that's part of the tragedy of it, is their families would have accepted them in a sense had they survived, or would have accepted them had they survived. But But in
I
Werther's,
don't know, Ed. I think we should argue about Romeo and Juliet at during some other show.
all righty. Well, with Werther, though, I think it's clear that he's not made the right choice, that he should have lived his life, that it is a tragedy that he killed himself, and that he, but okay, yeah, we're not going to go over there. So I've Shakespeare on my head, so sorry. But now he says, as the night advanced, a fierce wind arose from the woods and quickly dispersed the clouds that had loitered in the heavens. The blast tore along like a mighty avalanche and produced a kind of insanity in my spirits that burst all bounds of reason and reflection. This very
Mary Shelley drama queen.
Yeah, and it's very gothic and very, sublime, and nature, affecting, the characters. And he says, I lighted the dry branch of a tree and dance with fury around the devoted cottage, before he lights it on fire. And with a loud scream, I fired the straw, and heath and bushes which I had collected. The wind fanned the fire, and the cottage was quickly enveloped by the flames, which clung to it and licked it with their forked and destroying tongues. He does the dance of the fury dance around it. So it's the latest rage, everybody. It's better than the Monster Mash. All the creatures are doing it. Just set your house afire and dance with fury around it. So
yay for arson. But also let's note that the creature has gone a long way from sticking his hand in the fire and getting burned by it and realizing that fire is hot. Now he's wielding fire, although he is wielding fire for destructive purposes. And spoiler alert, at the very end of the novel, in the Arctic, there is also going to be a very big and very significant fire.
Well, he says there will be. So, yes. And that will be the way it ends. But I thought, thank you. I hadn't caught that link there, that he's using fire for destructive purposes, not the Promethean way, which is to inspire and to create.
Well, but it's inevitably a double-sided, like fire has always been this complicated double-sided thing, because fire has so often symbolized knowledge, and knowledge has creative potential, but if you don't wield knowledge properly, it has destructive potential, which, like, exhibit A, but also the Faustus story, where he in different versions, he sells his soul for knowledge and he is destroyed by it. So earlier we had him using fire to warm himself. Here we have him using fire for destruction. And that's that theme that runs through the entire novel of, is the light of knowledge used for good? Is it used appropriately, or is it misused by the people who have access to it?
Mm-hmm. Well, is it misused here in a sense? I mean, it is, in that he is indulging in his, in
He's
revenge.
destroying a perfectly good house that some other emigres from the French Revolution could use.
But at least he hasn't killed them, and he's holding off on that, at least, from murder. Although, I imagine, like, what, if he had encountered them now, would he not destroy them? So he may have, and we'll see.
It's a good question. Yeah. I mean, for him, it's a very short step from arson to murder.
Because he's unforgiving. He really is unforgiving. But now he's burned it down, and he says, and now, with the world before me, whither should I bend my steps? The allusion, of course,
to the ending of Paradise Lost, where Adam and Eve have been cast out of paradise, and they have the world before them as they take their solitary way, and that is the last line of the poem. But
the world was all before them.
But of course, the implication at the end of Paradise Lost is things aren't all bad, because yes, they're cast out of paradise, but this is only the first part of the tale. But this Jesus is the Son of God, will die on the cross and redeem humanity, and so there's that capacity for redemption.
Milton wrote a sequel, Paradise Regained, which nobody reads.
Yeah, because it doesn't
It's
have,
not very good.
like it's not very good,
Not very
because
interesting.
it doesn't have Satan in, which
Yeah.
again, it's a trap. It's evidence of our fallen state that we don't think the sequel is as good. Like that just means we're fallen and flawed human beings. But
crap.
Yeah, but the point is, Adam and Eve have hope of salvation at the end, even as they're, you know, winding their solitary way through the world. The creature doesn't. He is completely cast out, including by his creator. He doesn't even, you know, really know who, well, at this point he has the notes. He knows who Victor, but he has not met his creator. He is cast out. He has nobody. He does not have that hope of acceptance of salvation, of redemption that Adam and Eve have at the end of Paradise Lost.
Mm-hmm. And Victor's also said the same thing. Victor has also used this phrase. He has said to Walton, when Walton's talking about, you know, going on to the pole or not, Victor says, and this has already happened in the book, like the first time he meets Walton in the opening of the novel, he says to Walton, "You have hope and the world before you and have no cause for despair." So, you know, Mary Shelley's really, you know, intensifying this line. That's why I end the show every day. You have hope in the world before you. It is
and no cause for despair, unless of course your boat gets stuck in the Arctic, and then you
unless you do what I did
and freeze to death.
Unless you do with the kind of things that I do, so which is not listen to your crew and keep moving on. So Victor not listening to his family. The creature decides he's going to seek his creator, and where is that? That is, I have to move my thing here. I'm gonna. He says, "I learned from your papers that you were my father, my creator, and to whom could I apply with more fitness than to him who had given me life." And then lessons that Felix had bestowed upon Safie. Geography had not been omitted. So you had mentioned Geneva as your native town, so I'm going there. And of course, just because you learn geography doesn't mean you can go and find Geneva. I imagine him like walking, and then there's like a big sign with like the arrow sign. It's like Geneva, 400 miles. It's like, oh, okay, that's where I need to go.
It seems like a great escape room type concept for like the modern day, take away somebody's smartphone and drop them like somewhere in Germany or Switzerland and be like, okay, get to Geneva, no smartphones.
So, I mean, the fact that he would know, like he's learned where Geneva is in relation to where he is a little, unlikely in Germany. But anyway, and he says the sun was his only guide. So he's just, moving towards this way. This is the direction he needs to go. And then my travels were long and the sufferings I endured intense. And it's late autumn when he leaves, and he describes the sun becomes heatless and rain and snow is pouring down on him. And, this is, this is like a montage right here of, like the creature traveling through the mountains and everything. And I think of it's like a Rocky training montage from all the Rocky films, especially Rocky IV in Russia, where he's up in the mountains, like running up there in Russia. But this is his Rocky training montage, his traveling scene. He's got a purpose, and he's got to go, to Victor to claim something from him because he is his creator. And also to note, everybody too, everything that's happened now, this is a year and he has left. Victor is still in Ingolstadt with Henry, recovering. He recovers for 2 years. He doesn't leave until the spring, until he finds out that his, brother has been killed. And that hasn't happened yet. So Victor's actually still in Ingolstadt right now as the creature is traveling towards Geneva. So it takes him months to travel this, distance that shouldn't take him months to travel. But he doesn't know where he's going.
And also this is before you have railroads. Oh, he wouldn't have been able to to take a railroad. But yeah, this is in like the period of time when travel was really slow and took a really long time because, you know, it was either some type of horse-drawn carriage type thing or...
But it is, if you look on a map at like the general area where the creature is, and when he gets to Geneva, if he's wandering around trying to just find this place, it's a few months that he could be doing. It's very reasonable. It's not unlikely that it would have taken him this long to do that, or that it even like that's a reasonable amount of time. I mean, and if he walks straight, he could have done it faster, but he doesn't know where he's going. So that part actually works a bit. And then, but as he's walking, even the first of spring comes, and it cheered even me by the loveliness of its sunshine and balminess of the air. He begins to revive a bit. You know, I dared to be happy. We're not expecting this, but he's still going back and forth. He's still not confirmed in his revenge. He is still rethinking it as he's walking along here. Even his soft tears again bedewed my cheeks, and I raised my humid eyes with thankfulness towards the blessed sun, which bestowed such joy upon me. I guess what we should be ready for is, oh, look, the creature's smiling. Something bad's going to happen to him. And he hears the sound of voices. A young girl comes running along, laughing. He follows her, and then she almost dies. She falls into a stream, and he jumps in and saves her. At least he says he does. I mean, he says like the extreme labor from the force of the current saved her and dragged her to shore. I wonder, like, I mean, it could be a perception thing. Like she goes into the water and she would have gotten out, except that this giant creature jumped in and grabbed her and hauled her ashore. But he believes that he has saved her, that she was going to drown. I think that's probably the case. And then the guy that she was running around the woods with comes up, sees the creature over her as I endeavored by every means in my power to restore animation. Again, we get that phrase, to bring to life, because she is senseless. She's unconscious. And the guy tears her from his arms and they run off. And it's funny because this is the mistake that he makes. I followed speedily, hardly knew why. But when the man saw me draw near, he aimed the gun and fired, and he shoots the creature. I sunk to the ground, and my injurer, with increased swiftness, escaped into the wood. All this guy knows is, oh my God, that monster's chasing us, and he turns and he shoots at him. And so if he had let them run off, he would have, well, obviously they still would have ran from him, but at least he wouldn't have gotten shot. So it's the guy's fault for shooting him, believe me, but the guy really thought he was in danger. This 8-foot, deformed being was over top of his, girlfriend, and what was he going to think except, oh my gosh, what has happened here? And he takes her and runs away, and then shoots the creature when he's chasing him. So it's that happenstance. It's that in this case, it's not even so much, it's not only the rejection of people seeing him and being frightened, but it's also the circumstances have been a misunderstanding. Just as with Felix, the circumstances, he comes in and this creature's grabbing his father and he thinks he's attacking him. Poor creature. So he's been shot. And right away, like, this was then the reward of my benevolence. I save her life and they shoot me. All this hopeful, smiling, looking at the blessed sun is now gone. A few moments before gave place to hellish rage and gnashing of teeth. The ball had entered my shoulder. I don't know if it went through or not, but again, he's suffering, and it's the language there, my sufferings, the oppressive sense of the injustice, ingratitude, daily vows for revenge, deep and deadly revenge, outrages and anguish. I mean, this is, this is what he's feeling right now. That's really intensified by the repetition of these phrases that Mary Shelley's using.
And also the choice of the word sufferings, because in French, which is the language in which he apparently read Verter, it's les souffrances du jeune Verter. So the way that it's translated is les souffrances, the sufferings. So once again, perhaps an allusion to Verter in the language there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Good note, good catch. I was going to mention that he shot, and then after some weeks, my wound healed. Like again, he is a superhuman creature. If a person gets shot and gets no medical treatment, and not even sure if the bullet's in them or not, still, they're likely not going to survive. This is, the infection will set in, but the creature's able to survive this. And I don't think that's a lapse in Mary Shelley not not paying attention to, oh, this would be really dangerous, he couldn't just survive this. No, I think it's an acknowledgement that the creature is superhuman, that he can be shot and just heal. I mean, it'll hurt him. The bullet goes in him. He's not bulletproof, but he has a kind of invincibility. You wonder whether or not he can die, or is he like Wolverine? Can he like regenerate when he's wounded, right? So
maybe he's immune to infection because this is a dead body dug up from the grave. So it's already got all sorts of icky bacteria in it. What's a little more, Yeah. Yeah, no, it's an interesting question because, Victor does say he had kind of created the creature larger than the normal humans, but also the creature says that he had been created, to be a more sturdy, to better support cold and suffering. So perhaps he is also less susceptible to, say, infection, although they would not have had an understanding of infection in the same way at this moment. They didn't really understand bacteria in this moment. But they would have known that sometimes if you get shot and you don't clean it, bad things happen.
Yeah. How dangerous. I mean, if you get shot and you're just out in the woods and then just still traveling along, you're not going to survive that. Or if you do, it's just a miracle that you survive. Anyway, and
Elizabeth asks, was germ theory even a thing? Then I can tell you very firmly that no, it was not.
No, absolutely not yet. So that doesn't happen until later. But it's just, you don't even need to know germ theory to know that if you get shot, your chances are you're not going to survive that without some kind of treatment.
Or even with treatment, if you get shot in the
you
wrong
could still
place.
die.
We all watched Hamilton.
Yeah, you could still die. So he goes on, and then after some weeks it healed, and then he says, the labors I endured were no longer to be alleviated by the bright sun or gentle breezes of spring. Nature's not going to save me anymore. Nature's not going to make me hopeful anymore. All joy was but a mockery, which insulted my desolate state and made me feel more painfully that I was not made for the enjoyment of pleasure. And that girl falling into the water and him jumping in, that's going to get in the James Wales. Oh, this is so good. I'm drinking the Deer Slayer straight now.
You're torturing me because again, they
don't send you
outside of Pennsylvania. I'm
going to send it to you. I promise you. You're going to get some.
Okay.
Well, let me know what you want. It was a Deer Slayer, whatever you want.
I'm not going to ask. I'm not going to ask how, but okay.
You're going to get it. I'm going to like the creature. I'm just going to venture off, and it might take me months, but I'll get there. And I'll just do the show from my phone as I'm on my travels. There you go. But in James Wales, 31 Frankenstein with Boris Karloff, he kind of takes that scene with the girl and in the lake and combines it then with what happens next with William and the creature meeting him and kind of creates something out of it, which I'll talk about in a minute after we get to William here. As he's getting close to Geneva, he arrives. I reached the environs of Geneva, so he's out on the outskirts, and he's very close. He hears the approach of a beautiful child. He was disturbed by the approach of a beautiful child, and then he just said, "No more hope," right? But again, here it is. The idea seized me that this little creature was unprejudiced and had lived too short a time to have imbibed the horror of deformity. If therefore I could seize him and educate him as my companion and friend, which sounds more like kidnapping, but I should not be so desolate in this peopled earth. Urged by this impulse, I seized the boy as he passed and drew him towards me. Not the way you should have gone about it, but the creature doesn't know. He's a year old, well, a year and a few months. He doesn't recognize that this isn't the way to go about it. So it's also happenstance. It's also, just bad luck that this is the way he's going about it. But he does have that idea that maybe I can be happy. Briefly, he thinks that when he sees this boy.
It's his capacity for self-delusion, I think, is very human.
Yeah. Okay. That's is it self-delusion, or is it his hope that he can, be loved?
Is hope maybe sometimes a form of self-delusion when it's contrary to every other experience you've had.
Well, the boy reacts in the way that you would expect him to react. Let me go, he cried, monster, ugly wretch. You wish to eat me and tear me to pieces. You are an ogre. Let me go, or I will tell my papa. Had William not called him a monster, and, would he have, reacted the way he does? But then he says, my papa is a syndic. He is Monsieur Frankenstein. He would punish you. You dare not keep me. And Frankenstein said, this is like Niagara Falls. And he's like in a rage right here. Do you know that reference, Niagara Falls? No, it's an old vaudeville routine. The Three Stooges used to use it a lot. So he encounters some guys in Niagara Falls and he goes crazy because something bad happened to him at Niagara Falls. Sorry. There are some older people out there who understood that reference. But he hears Frankenstein and that's it. But I do wonder if he had said Frankenstein, if the kid was like, oh, who are you? And behaved to him in a way that wasn't mean, and then said Frankenstein, I wonder if the creature would have gotten so angry, or, that it's the rejection plus Frankenstein that leads him to say, Frankenstein, you belong then to my enemy, to him towards whom I have sworn eternal revenge. You shall be my first victim. The child still struggled and loaded me with epithets which carried despair to my heart, so intensifying the rage in him. I grasped his throat to silence him, and in a moment he lay dead at my feet. I gazed on my victim, and my heart swelled with exultation and hellish triumph. Clapping my hands, I exclaimed, I too can create desolation. My enemy is not impregnable. This death will carry despair to him, and 1,000 other miseries shall torment and destroy him. Does he mean to kill him? What do you think?
Well, it's interestingly ambiguous because he says, you shall be my first victim, but then the way it's phrased, I grasped his throat to silence him.
Yeah.
But, that could mean any number of things. And the creature throughout these chapters, he's so impulsive. And I mean that in the sense of something triggers an emotional response to him. And based on this emotional response, he acts. So there's no amount of premeditation there. He doesn't plot to get to Geneva, find William specifically, and kill William specifically to get to Frankenstein. It's something that happens in the moment. And also burning the cottage, that, feelings of fury and anger are triggered in him and he sets it on fire. There's no premeditation there. And again, it reminds me of Victor in the earlier chapters, who too also just could not control his emotions. He just kept being buffeted back and forth by all of these things that he was feeling and had no grasp on, which is also what is happening to Verter, who is being buffeted by all these things that he cannot control. And this is the state the creature is in, where he has been cast out of this kind of peaceful paradise where he's living alongside the de Lacys and spying on them in this totally not creepy way. Once he's cast out of that calm paradise-like state, he's just at the mercy of whatever little thing triggers an emotional response to him, and then that immediately triggers an action before I think his like reason or rational mind even has a chance to kick in.
Yeah. And the film, as I was saying, the film is very different. That 31 film in which he's playing with this little girl by the lake and they're throwing flowers into the water, and then he runs out of flowers and he looks at her and thinks like she's like a flower, and he throws her into the lake and she's screaming as he does it, like, no, you're hurting me. And he throws her in and she drowns. Completely accidental. And he realizes what he's done right away, and he's, in a panic, and he runs away. But that innocence of destroying and that accidental death is something that happens frequently happens in adaptations. When he first kills, he does it by accident. I think it was the Dan Curtis Frankenstein I was just watching from the early 70s. And the creature, like the first one he kills, he's hugging him like, oh, I'm so happy, and I hug you, and he crushes him. And then he does it to somebody else, and it's almost like, uh-oh, did it again. Like, it's almost like a comedy routine how he's killing people by accident. In this case, we get that ambivalence, but after he's killed, but he does say he's going to be his first victim, and then he does rejoice in it. His hellish try, and he claps his hands. Maybe he's doing the fury dance again around the body, that he has destroyed his enemy in a sense. And this is the point of no return, right? He can't come back from this. He's finally done something horrible that he's not going to be able to come back from. And that's the real, that becomes the final step. I always find it interesting when I would teach this in college, and we'd all, I think I mentioned this before, the students would get very sympathetic towards the creature, as you should, and even later as you should. And I have to remind everybody, he killed a 9-year-old on purpose, like murdered him in cold blood. And then you have to, it's why I don't reject calling him a monster. Something, he is a monster. I think that you should still have sympathy for him. And I think I refer to him as the creature, but he does monstrous things, and whether or not they are justified, and you can justify them all you want. You can relate how he goes and kills people and why he is so full of this, rage and wants to revenge himself, and that can be perfectly justifiable, but he still does bad things. He still does monstrous things. And I don't think the novel lets him off the hook for that.
Absolutely. Although I do think, I was talking earlier about Paradise Lost being a trap. I think in some ways this is also written as a trap, because you get the creature's narrative and you get all of this sympathy for him. And just as you're invested in him as a fellow person, he starts committing all of these murders, but you're already invested, you're already sympathizing. And so you're already primed to justify what he's doing. And I think that's kind of the real difficulty of simultaneously having sympathy and understanding while also acknowledging the wrongness of what he's done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Well, he has killed William and rejoiced, and then he notices the locket around his neck. Let's just finish this chapter. And he takes it off him. It's a beautiful one, portrait of a most lovely woman. And in spite of my malignity, it softened and attracted me, as I'm taking it from this dead child. Is a little weird. But then he says, can you wonder that such thoughts transported me with rage? I mean, this is him. He's speaking to Victor now. I only wonder that at that moment, instead of venting my sensations and exclamations in agony, I did not rush among mankind and perish in the attempt to destroy them. This is what he tells Victor. And then he sees this young woman passing near him. We know it's Justine. And, thanks to the lessons of Felix and the sanguinary laws of men, I have learned how to work mischief. This is something he's learned from books. This is, people do these kinds of things. People will do something to someone that causes them harm later. And this is where he's learned it, he says. And he puts the locket in her dress, knowing that, like, I killed him. The locket will be found on her. He willingly does that. He knows that he's going to hurt her. So there's his second victim. He is purposefully cast the blame to Justine for the murder of William. So she will be destroyed. So that is another murder at his feet. And then at length, I wondered.
It's so much more premeditated because, William, he kind of killed in the heat of the moment, arguably. With what he does with Justine, that process of thinking, well, if I put the locket in her dress, the way that men work is they're going to blame her. I mean, that is premeditated. Like, that's a whole other level of murder.
Yeah. That's not him acting out of this rage, after encountering the child, like yelling at him and saying the word Frankenstein. And that's he could have made, his lawyer could have made the argument that he was, insane in that moment. Not here. He is clearly premeditating her to be hurt by this, if not killed. So he wanders the mountains and consumed by a burning passion which you alone can gratify. He's just talking to Victor now at the fire. We may not part until you have promised to comply with my requisition. I am alone and miserable. Man will not associate with me, but one as deformed and horrible as myself would not deny herself to me. My companion must be of the same species and have the same defects. This being you must create. So he's requesting a mate.
Mm-hmm.
As ugly as he is, as deformed as he is, that he will finally have someone with him.
Which obviously that's what Adam did, when he was created, and he kind of goes to God and says, well, I'm alone, make me a mate. This is the creature doing the same thing. And again, the question of, has he gotten this idea from Paradise Lost that he can find his creator and do this? And the whole set of influences that coalesced to him and to him making this request.
I think so. It's something for people to think about after the show, and it is the idea we mentioned earlier.
We're assigning homework now.
Yeah, because the idea of that idea that you touched on briefly earlier, that like how art or really things like video games can affect our behavior in a sense. I mean, I think the way Mary Shelley's written this, the creature is acting out, is absolutely affected by the things that he has read, and reacts in a way in accordance with the books that he has read. So is that the one of the points being made here? So if a work of fiction makes points, so.
And that's something we also see a lot with science fiction, of which this is arguably, the first work. Science fiction very much also influences so much of our lives and so much of our inventions. And, that's a whole other category that we can talk about.
All righty. Thank you. And then next week, we'll more of that creature talk. Thank you for being here for 3 weeks in a row.
No problem.
And Franken readers, thank all of you for tuning in today. We will post this recording on our website. And if that's how you're watching, thanks for watching. We have a Sundays with Frankenstein Facebook group where we can continue the conversation. So look us up on Facebook and join in that conversation. I'm always available to answer questions via email. Ooh, I had one today I wanted to hit. I'll talk about it on the next show. Next week's co-host will not be Anastasia, unless something happens and she's in the audience and I have to bring her on. But next week's co-host,
I'll arrange to kidnap Dan Hodge and just take over for him too.
There you go. Next week's co-host,
I'll hire the creature.
You'll tap into his computer and stuff and change the time on them so he misses the time. But next week will be actor and collector Dan Hodge. Everyone, the first edition of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is just one of the many gems of the Rosenbach's collections. If you're looking for more virtual engagement, head on over to the Rosenbach website. Check out the other virtual offerings we have, including the one coming up this Thursday night, Mary Shelley presentation that I'm giving. And the Rosenbach's also open on the weekends, Friday, Saturday, Sundays. You can get timed tickets. You visit the Rosenbach website for those to register for a visit. Just one party at a time gets to go through the museum. And you can check out our new exhibition on 19th century Japanese sailor Manjiro, which I haven't even seen yet. And I look forward to the day when I can go back into work after I'm vaccinated and I can see that. I take no chances. I'm waiting for a vaccine before I'm out there in the world. I might go get booze every now and then, but that's it. So priorities. Please support the Rosenbach. You can also do that by donation. And if you're not already a member, I invite you to join. Anastasia, thank you. And I'm sure you'll
pleasure as always. And once again, Data says hi, and I'm very happy to know your cats were watching.
Yes, good. Yeah, we have lots of cats. My cat adored us today. My cat didn't come up today. So join us next week on Sundays with Frankenstein. We finish volume 2. We'll hit chapter 9 of that, and we'll begin volume 3 when the creature in chapter 9 asks for a mate, and then Victor decides to leave his family once again to create another creature, because that worked out so well the first time he did it. Once again, will be played out by Tucker Christine's pleated gazelle song, It's Alive. Farewell, wandering spirits, and remember, you have hope and the world before you. Bye-bye.